Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. Let us talk. Let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bubb Report. We go there.
Hello and welcome to the October 22nd edition of the Bubb Report. I am Rion Charles. This week on our program, the October 1983 tragedy and the subsequent political crisis which led to a military invasion is taking on added significance this year, on the 40th anniversary of the demise of the Second Grenada Revolution. It is also the first time since the October 19th events that the recently elected NDC administration announced the tragic day as a public holiday, dubbed National Heroes Day. For many decades, the Maurice Bishop Martyrs Foundation and other citizens have been clamoring for the 19th to be declared a public holiday. One of those people was the late Judy Williams, a civil society activist.
I am always perplexed by the fact that October 25th is a public holiday in Grenada and October 19th is hardly mentioned. I am perplexed. We celebrate Columbus Day. We celebrate all kinds of Queen's birthday. And yet the people whose vision for this country was like no other, we do not celebrate anything for them. I am perplexed. We, the people of Grenada, must do something about that.
On the other hand, many Grenadians are still divided about the two national holidays that are being observed in Grenada. While sympathizers of the revolution saw the tragic end of the revolution as a great loss for Grenada, others opposed to the revolution cheered the end of a period of political repression and the suspension of civil liberties and the Constitution. We will debate the merits of the declared National Heroes Day and how it fits within the current commemorations designated as Grenada's darkest month since independence.
Is that this sort of assassination must not be allowed to continue in our country. It means that our people there are not safe. It means that Grenadians are never being given the chance to choose for themselves the country that they want. And therefore it is necessary for us to see to it that they have the opportunity to do so. To do this, we have to isolate the persons who have committed the acts that they did last week in killing off most of the cabinet. And we have to ensure that, in fact, an interim government of persons of not political greed, but persons who are good administrators and who are Grenadians, who can run the country for a few months for the pure purpose of putting the country back on the democratic status, so that elections can take place as soon as possible. This is what we want to do so that Grenadians can choose for themselves the government they want and not have every few years have governments imposed on them by persons will otherwise than their own.
Also on our program, we sit with a Washington Post reporter who will preview her upcoming podcast, the empty grave of Comrade Maurice Bishop. Reporter Martin Powers attempted to find new answers about how the United States fits into Grenada's greatest unsolved mystery. We welcome our guests, Dr. Terence Marichaud of the Maurice Bishop Martyrs Foundation, Augustine Gus John, renowned scholar and human rights campaigner, Martin Powers, podcast host at The Washington Post, Dennis Charles, former PRG political detainee, and George Bowen, also a former detainee. Here is our host, Dr. Kellon Bubb, with this week's editorial titled Celebrating the Unsung Grenadian National Heroes. We thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellon Bubb, and we're happy you can join us today. Now, as Grenada commemorated its first National Heroes Day, briefly overshadowed by the initial ill-advised decision to view October 19th as the day of the launch of the island's 50th anniversary of independence, it was refreshing to hear Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell's pronouncement that any designation of national hero status must first receive the people's seal of approval. In fact, there already exists a constitutional mechanism to under the National Heroes and Awards Act for the establishment of a Society of Honor, which is to be chaired by the Governor General of the country. Perhaps one of the first orders of business of this commission, when constituted, is to also look at finally replacing British-themed colonial awards that citizens still take pride in receiving from their racist colonizers. A demonstration of British colonialism's Stockholm Syndrome hold on the minds of their former colonized. And speaking of colonialism, I propose that the first national hero of Grenada should be the first settlers of the island of Camahan. Yes, Grenada was called Camahan before it was called Grenada by the Spanish. The Kalinago people who resisted the first waves of settler colonialism by the French invaders in the 1600s. Contrary to the narrative that is told, they all ended their lives by jumping over one solitary cliff in the north of the island. There are countless historical counter-narrative accounts of resistance against occupation by our first peoples. We then must first honor every single enslaved African who also resisted their enslavement in Grenada. We know of Julian Fedor and his heroism. There are also other unsung enslaved heroes who formed maroon villages in the name of freedom as well. All of those who have fought, whether they have earned an official title or not, deserve appreciation. Their struggles, sincerity, and generosity should be an example so that goodness continues to become a culture that is rooted in this nation. And at this time, I wish to welcome our first guest for this morning's program. She is Martine Powers of the Washington Post. I do apologize for the mispronunciation that it was Martin, but it's actually Martine. Welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited and looking forward to listening to your podcast, which is to be launched tomorrow. So yes, it's certainly a treat to have you here. But Martine, we want to begin by talking about what got you interested in the unresolved, or shall we say, the still mysterious Grenada story of the missing bodies of the deceased who died on October 19th.
Yeah, sure. So I guess where I should start is the fact that I have some West Indian roots. My mom is from Trinidad. And so I think growing up, I was vaguely aware of a little bit of the history of Maurice Bishop and of a little bit of the revolution, but more of the invasion. My parents would talk about it sometimes. I grew up in Miami, so I kind of got a little bit more of the American view of things. But really what happened is that around 6 years ago, my parents moved to Grenada to retire. So they live there now. And when I started to go there, spend time with them and meet their friends and just talk to people there, I heard so much more of this mystery and what it means to people. And I just remember thinking this is really strange that these remains have been missing and that so many people have been asking for them for such a long time. And of course, there's the element of, was the US somehow involved in the disappearance of the remains? And so I had been thinking about it for a while. And then a couple of years ago, I was like, maybe someone should really look into this in a more robust way. And I know that there have been investigations in the past, and particularly in the late 90s and early 2000s. But kind of looking at more of the American side of things and saying, okay, I know that, prime ministers have asked the US government, in broad ways, like what happened to these remains or, but if you could track down the people who were actually in Grenada at the time and talk to them. And so that's what I tried to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, you talk about the investigations in the early 2000s. I suspect you're referencing the investigation that was done by a group of high school students. Is that the investigation?
The Presentation Brothers College.
The Presentation Brothers College Young Leaders. Yes.
Yes. I have read that report up and down, and I continue to be so impressed by the work of these teenagers from 23 years ago. And I've talked to a couple of them, as well as Brother Robert, who helped lead that project. And there was that, but also the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and some of the work that they put together in terms of documenting a lot of what's known and what's not known. Those were incredibly helpful. And you hear on the podcast that we cite those a lot.
Mm-hmm. So those would be cited in the podcast as well, the Truth and Reconciliation report, as well as the report from the PBC Young Leaders back then. Yeah. But part of what you just indicated here is that you will be speaking to people on the other side of the ledger, if you will. Obviously, we're not going to give away too much. No spoilers in respect of the podcast. We don't want to do that. But have you encountered any challenges in respect of speaking to those people who were on the ground in Grenada during the American military invasion there at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think speaking broadly, there are different groups of people that we're talking about here, right? Like there are diplomats who were on the island at the time, soldiers, politicians. And I think maybe two of the big challenges that we've run into is, one is not that surprising, which is that this was 40 years ago. And for a lot of Americans who were there, that was a long time ago. And some of them say, I was in Grenada for 4 days and I remember two things from my time there. And that trying to kind of pull out some of these memories has been challenging. But also I think, especially for members of the military who were there, a lot of those memories are really painful and traumatic in their own way. And, I know that is something that is incredibly familiar to Grenadians who went through this experience, for whom talking about these memories is really difficult 40 years later. But also for members of the military, I think that they also have this feeling of, this came at a cost to us too, of American soldiers dying and having to witness or experience things that were really difficult. And so I think trying to get them open enough to talk about those experiences, I think, is part of what we tried to do with this podcast.
Yeah, it's and of course it's extremely difficult. Now, were you able to access any National Archive information? The National Archives, I'm not too sure if you are in the DMV area, in the Washington D.C. metropolitan area. You are, okay.
Yeah.
But we do have National Archives here. Is that something you did as well, or you?
Yeah, we've been trying to dig into lots of different documents and also filing Freedom of Information requests, some of which have not come through yet because it's a 4-year waiting period to get responses on some of these things. I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of the steps that you go through to try to get that kind of those kinds of records. But we were able to find some really interesting documents that I think illuminate a little bit more about what was happening during this period. And so I'm excited to share a little bit more of that when the podcast comes out.
On the podcast, yeah, absolutely. Now let us talk about, now you just alluded to the fact that many people really did not want to speak. They did not want to open up. And I found that to be the case as well. Even for the production of today's program, there were many people who we reached out to who did not want to come on camera. They would speak to me over the phone for hours, but they just did not want to talk about the pain of that period. What would you say has been your biggest challenge on the Grenada end of things? Is that consistent with what I just articulated?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my sense is that some people feel like they've talked about this a lot over the years, right? That there's the fact that there is an opportunity every October to remember, these revolutionaries, and that for some people, I think that's a real source of power and comfort to be able to have those conversations every year. But I think for other people, at least from what I found, that is difficult, that it sort of tears open wounds every year. And so we came across people who either didn't want to talk to us at all, which I understand, or that it took some persuading to get them to go back and tell the story again of, what happened on October 19th, what they remember, what they saw. But those accounts are also so important. And my sense is that for young people in Grenada right now, they're not always hearing that history, or they don't necessarily get the opportunity to really understand exactly what October 19th meant, and also what the 4.5 years before meant, and what the revolution was like, and what it was like for people to live through that period. And so it's a lot, I think, emotionally for people.
No, it absolutely is. And now let us talk about the podcast. What would be the length of the podcast? How many episodes are we talking?
So it's 6 episodes. Each episode is about an hour, or maybe a little bit under. So it's it's a lot. The first 2 episodes come out on Monday, and then every week following, there will be another episode after that released through November.
And where can listeners access the podcast? And credit to one of our viewers, Mr. Lev Pepperseed. He's the one that tagged the podcast, at least the preview, from the Washington Post website onto our Bubb Reports page. And so credit to him for giving us the tip that you're working on this.
Well, I thank him for posting the trailer.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for people to be able to listen to it, and I know not everyone listens to podcasts, and so and that's totally all right. But so this is basically an audio documentary. So it's no visual, it's just audio, and people will be able to listen to it on a podcast app on their phone. So if you have an iPhone, there's Apple Podcasts. If you have an Android, there's like a podcast app that already lives on your phone, and you can search for The Empty Grave of Comrade Bishop. But it's also going to be on YouTube. So if people are on YouTube, they can search Empty Grave of Comrade Bishop and listen to it there, as well as the Washington Post website, which is washingtonpost.com. And you'll see a link up there for the podcast.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to that podcast. It's creating a lot of buzz in the Canadian community. It really is. Now, let us talk about... in terms of, obviously you're not going to reveal too much because the podcast is not premiered yet, but what, based on all of the archival information that you had access to, based on the conversations that you've had with people, do you believe at the end of your podcast that citizens who are desirous of closure would be able to get that closure, or at least come close to getting that closure?
Well, I think that there are 2 different forms of answers that I think could provide that closure, right? I think what people would ideally want is actual remains to be able to bury and to be able to perform the act of having a funeral. And then there's the question of like what happened, like having a better story or understanding or narrative of what transpired that ended up with these remains having gone missing. And I think, it's not a surprise to anyone that, there's not a funeral right now. I haven't found remains that I was able to hand back to family members. But I do think in terms of understanding better the story and the narrative of the chain of events that transpired in the weeks after October 19th. My hope is that what we're able to provide will be able to fill in some gaps and give a little bit more understanding for people who have had theories over the years and been trying to research this and trying to understand it, and that maybe this will fill in some of those gaps.
Absolutely. Martine, we are all looking forward to the podcast. It's an extension of the work that was done really by the PBC Young Leaders in the early 90s. And that also created a lot of buzz. I remember I was a young reporter at the time in Grenada, and that just when that hit the airwaves they said that, the PBC Young Leaders might be getting a breakthrough. The entire island was intrigued by their findings and what emerged out of that. But it continues to be a lingering question for the Grenadian people. Is there anything else you wish to add before we go to the next segment?
No, just that I'm grateful for so many Grenadians who have talked to me. I mean, as an American coming in, I think that it's, as I said, not always easy to get people to open up. And there were so many Grenadians who have been incredibly helpful and kind of sharing their stories. And I'm just so grateful for that.
Absolutely. Martine Powers, thank you so very much.
Thank you. And hopefully you have me back on when the podcast is all out, and then we can talk about all the details.
Absolutely. We want to talk about, as young people say, all of the tea.
Yes, exactly. All the tea. Let's go.
All of the good tea. And I'm sure we will get reaction from our other guests who hear about this in the second segment. But we want to thank Martine Powers viewers and listeners for appearing on the Bubb Report. As a reminder, the podcast will be premiered tomorrow on all streaming platforms, including Spotify. You can also access the podcast on the Washington Post's website. It will be available. We will be posting a link to the podcast to the Washington Post page where you can access the episodes. The first tranche of episodes, the first episode will be released tomorrow on all of the streaming platforms, as well as on the Washington Post page. And Ms. Powers also indicated that it would also be available on YouTube. So what we want to do is to take a quick break, viewers and listeners, and we will be right back for the panel segment of the week. Please stand by.
Hello, everyone. I am Chantal McGuire, your local bred Grenadian actuary and asset liability management expert. Are you satisfied with your current finances? Are you curious and constantly looking for ways to make additional income? Join me on the Bubb Report as we strive to empower you, our valued audience, to become more financially literate and help evolve Grenadians into a mindset that's investment focused and entrepreneurial. Literacy is about freedom. It's about being able to control your money and not letting your money control you. It's about foresight for a brighter future. Our core mission is to promote financial literacy and share money-generating opportunities for everyone. Join us on the last Sunday of every month, starting July 30th, as we strive to provide the keys to financial freedom.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
if those guys should be tried and convicted for what happened on the fort, why shouldn't the revolution, the PRG 26, be tried for those guys who were killed at Mount Rich and St. Terence? For the guy that was killed in Union in St. Mark, for Strand Philip that was gunned down in Mount Airy, for the guys who died on the park in Queen's Park in June 19. That was no revolutionaries or counters. It was a setup to make the revolution look as though it was under attack. Nobody was charged for that. In fact, they picked up the wrong guys and incarcerated them, Kenny Budlal and others, and they had nothing to do with it. They executed Strand Philip because of that. Strand Philip was not there. So when we're talking about criminals and murderers and so on, people are forgetting that they are using standards that suit them. And to me, that is more unconscionable than the fact of people saying, leave the murderers in jail. It's far more unconscionable.
And welcome back, viewers and listeners. 40 years later today, Grenada was under a state of siege, shall we say, a shot-on-sight curfew. For many, it was much worse than the COVID-19 curfew that was imposed on Grenadians during the COVID-19 pandemic. That was a public health regulation restriction, but during that period leading up to the October 25th invasion, it was certainly a period of uncertainty for many Grenadians. And that period is still very polarizing and still very divisive. For some, the American invasion is seen as an intervention, as a rescue mission. For others, it's seen as an imperialist overreach on a small island in the Caribbean. And here to have a conversation about the events that unfolded 40 years later are Dr. Terence Marichaud, who I had the pleasure of interviewing as a young reporter in Grenada. Dr. Marichaud has not aged a day. Welcome to the Bubb Report, sir. I believe this is your first time being with us, so I'm happy to have you here. We also have Mr. Gus John, who is a scholar and activist. And Mr. John is here in a dual capacity because Mr. John is also one of the foremost people involved in Britain's Black History Month. So we're going to have a conversation about that. But Mr. John was also a very close friend and a roommate of the late Prime Minister Maurice Bishop, and he knew him very well, both as a presentation college student and as a student in England. You guys were roommates as well. It's interesting that perhaps PBC has a penchant for producing prime ministers, but we'll get to that conversation shortly there, Mr. John. And we have Mr. Dennis Charles. Mr. Dennis Charles, who is a former political detainee. He was incarcerated during the period 1979 to 1983. And for people like Mr. Charles, October 25th marks Liberation Day, because for Mr. Charles and others, it was a day when they were indeed freed from some of the experiences that they had up at Richmond Hill and at Hopevale. So we're going to get into a very important conversation here around those events that defined not only the 79 to 83 period, but the period leading up to 79 and 83. It was indeed a volatile period. But Dr. Marichaud, I want to begin with you. For many years, as a young reporter in Grenada, I covered the October 19th memorial activities that your Martyrs Foundation and at the time the Maurice Bishop Patriotic Movement held on the Fort George, formerly called Fort Rupert during the Revolution. You were one of those people in the vineyard. People like yourself, Judy Williams, have been calling and clamoring for government to give October 19th the same prominence that it gives to October 25th and other holidays. So based on all of the activism that you've been doing over this recognition, can you reflect today, sir, on the decision by government to declare October 19th as National Heroes Day and the significance that that portends for you and others?
Okay, first of all, Canon, let me thank you for your kind invitation to appear on your program. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes.
Well, as you know, we have been involved in this struggle for many years to give October the 19th the kind of prominence and recognition that it deserves. We are doing so not to glorify the day, not to celebrate it as a holiday, but really as a day of sober reflection because of what it represented for us as a people. It's in fact the most tragic day, it's the bloodiest day we have ever seen in our modern day history. And in calling for that day to be a national holiday, we are not focusing on the day as being a day of festivities, but as a day when people could soberly reflect on the events of that period and learn from it. What happened on October the 19th wasn't Grenadian by any stretch of the imagination. It wasn't the kind of action and violent action that we saw there that was characteristic of how Grenadians are and how we live our lives on a daily basis. It was totally opposed to the Grenadian psyche and everything that went on. And it's a day really that people should use for solemn reflection, nothing else, just reflection on what took place in that period and learn from the lessons of that day so that these actions are never to be repeated in the future. That is the whole idea. It is not to glorify it and make it a holiday. Some people are saying that, oh, it's another holiday. But, in our entire calendar of events, we don't have anything really dedicated to our history except maybe Emancipation Day. And this is a salient part of our history. It transcends the whole period, and it's important for its transcendental importance in our history so that we can think about it and get some answers, and maybe use that day to go forward, knowing that we are guided by the lessons of that period. And these are things that, again, as I said before, never should be repeated. That was the whole idea of it. That's why we fought for it. And to see it finally come to pass, I must go on record and congratulate the Deacon Mitchell administration for their courageous and magnanimous decision in making this day a day that we have been calling for, a day of reflection. I know there are many, people in the society, many currents in the society. There are some people who probably don't agree with it. I've been seeing some of the comments on social media by some people. And it is not, again, some people are saying you're glorifying criminals. And, it's not about that. It's not about glorifying criminals. It's about a day of sober reflection just to also get some answers in terms of what led up to this day. We have had some reports. We haven't had any final thing on that, any final consensus on what really led up to it, because the actors, the real serious actors in that period have never really come forward and spoken about it. In fact, the only credible report comes from a book written by a jurist from Belize called Godfrey Smith, who interviewed many of these people. And he gave what I would call the most credible account thus far of what took place in that period. And there leaves a lot in terms of what took place in that period to be divulged. There's a big void still for people to understand exactly what took place. And unfortunately, many of the people who were jailed for those activities promised that when we didn't hear the full story, and when they got out, we were going to get a real thing. Sadly, up to this day, they are not speaking, and we're no closer to solving that mystery too. But at the end of the day, this first, what they call National Heroes Day, I think it's a misnomer. I think we have to have more discussions about that in terms of how the day should be named.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because we're going to have that conversation, because I do strongly believe that October 19th is still a polarizing day for many Grenadians.
Yes, it is.
So we really have to think about perhaps finding a neutral day. Finding a neutral day to call it National Heroes Day. And given the nature of Grenada, the Grenadian body politic, this is already generating a lot of conversation.
Yes.
But yes, Mr. John, you yourself, are someone who has been in the vineyard, in the activist vineyard, shall we say. Have you been following the developments that have taken place in Grenada in respect of elevating October 19th to the place that it now has on the national calendar?
Kellen, thank you so much. Yes, sure, I have. Thanks for inviting me to join you.
Yes.
I welcome the opportunity. I think it must have been about 12 years ago, I did a film on Fort Rupert, actually on the 19th of October, when I was drawing attention to people in Britain of what was actually happening in Grenada then. And as you indicated earlier, the 25th of October was being celebrated, the day of the invasion, but not the 19th, when those martyrs lost their lives on Fort Rupert. So yes, I mean, I have been following that, and following the courageous, as Terry Marisho was just saying, following the courageous actions of Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell in acknowledging that something had to be done to mark this particular day. It's a day for me of remembrance of how the revolution imploded, the shock that went through not just the Caribbean, but across the world, because obviously Maurice Bishop was revered across the world. The revolution was lauded across the world, but for what it was, how it occurred, the fact that it was not a bloody revolution, and the fact that the people of Grenada for once had the opportunity to engage in government and in democratic participation. All right, not everybody agreed. The Roman Catholic Church had done a great job to turn people against socialism and communism and all of that stuff. So the revolution happened against a particular background and history, which made it all the more incredible, because the people welcomed the opportunity to govern themselves and to bring about a change in the way their destiny was being shaped for them.
Well, one might argue, Mr. John, that the people were already doing so by way of self-governance, and the counter argument here as well would be that there was a democratically elected government. The 4 years of the revolution was not democratic in the way that small d democratic that we define democracy. Certainly, there were people's participation. There was people's participation. One can argue that the development flourished during that period and international airport resulted, but the other side of the coin must also be acknowledged.
Yes, but I mean, I guess, Kellen, that you're asking this question with your tongue firmly in your cheek, because frankly, if one were to look at the trajectory of electoral politics in Grenada for 2, 3, 4 decades before then we really must have serious questions to answer. I mean, how were people going to get rid of Eric Gary and his Mongoose gang and the Tonton Macoutes and those people? Look, that two-party Westminster parliamentary system divided a very small country, 90,000, 110,000 people, divided them and sowed some deep divisions and fissures within the society. People were not really managing to make decisions about anything in the areas, because quite often what the electorate did was to hand over power to an elected executive who simply decided what they wanted to do with the population. It does not fit Grenada, frankly. And we have what the revolution demonstrated, in my view, was that it was possible to have the forums within civil society, women, youth, farmers, peasants, workers, who had the capacity to concentrate on their individual sectional interests, yes, but on the interests of the nation as a whole. That is what was particularly peculiar about the Grenadian Revolution. And you just got to look at the gains that there were in that very short period to understand why had that implosion not occurred, with the people in the Central Committee and CORD and the two factions warring amongst themselves, the people would have blossomed, and the Grenada and its economy, its cultural values, and all else would have taken a path which had been not been seen in the Caribbean before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. John, I'm going to bring in Mr. Charles here because on the Bubb Report, we pride ourselves on balance and accommodating all sides, accommodating all perspectives. And we were not going to have this program without having those who credibly suffered during that period as well, those who were imprisoned and those who were denied due process. Remember, the Grenada Constitution was suspended. People did not have due rights. And yes, you had the Mongoose gang who did terrible things. And there is documented evidence of that. But on the other hand, you also had a lack of due process. So, Mr. Charles, welcome to the Bubb Report, sir. I remember last year when I had a conversation with one of your other colleagues, you called me right away.
I did.
It's indeed a pleasure to have you here, sir, because you know, for you, obviously, you know, perspective and worldviews are everything. And for you, and for those who were incarcerated at the time, including my former boss, Mr. Leslie Pear, including Mr. Tillman Thomas, who was a former prime minister of the country, by the way, who presided over renaming the international airport to Maurice Bishop International Airport when he served as prime minister. So he actually has engaged in a process of restorative justice and forgiveness as well. But let us talk about, for you, sir, first and foremost, the naming of October 19th as a national holiday and designating it as Heroes Day against the backdrop of the October 25th holiday that many Grenadians oppose, diametrically opposed to the October 19th holiday. But for you, October 25th, perhaps, and for you and others who are detained, perhaps has much more significance because you were released from prison, from unconstitutional detention during that time. So let us talk about that.
All right. Well, good morning, Dr. Bubb and fellow panelists. It's a pleasure to be here. As you know, my name is Dennis Charles, and yes, I was incarcerated up at Richmond Hill Prison. I spent part of a night at Fort Rupert, Fort George, but most of my time was spent almost 2 years and 8 months. I came out just before the implosion. I was released. But Tillman Thomas and the bulk of prisoners, political prisoners from Richmond Hill, they came out on October 25th. And they came out by accident because they were not released by the soldiers or the prisoner officials. It was a prisoner that got the key and went from cell to cell and forced them out. And some of them had to walk and pass through the bushes and all of that. They were so scared because the PRAs had guns and so forth to make it up to the country. I think they commanded a truck in front of the prison, one of the detainees, and managed to get most of the guys up. Tivoli, La Poetry Conference, Hermitage, and all of that. But it was hundreds and hundreds of detainees. And I'm not talking about what we call the Rastafari community in Hopeville, which unfortunately, I didn't hear Dr. Terence Marisho talk about, neither the last guest talk about. So I don't want us to be here in La La Land in some sort of alternate reality, right? I want us to engage again, and I extend a challenge to debate. I want to speak with Dr. Marisho, and I think the lady was called Dr. Martin Powers. If I
Martin Powers, yes. Martin Powers, yes.
I would like to know how many detainees she spoke with. I would like to know if she went to Hopeville and saw the conditions that the Rastas were kept in. An old cattle pen. They had to sleep on the floor. Rain, they see the sun by day, and rain come on them at night on the floor in the mud, and they had to sleep there. They had to walk in the hot sun, surrounded by AK-47, forced labor, beatings, handcuffing them and putting them in drain for days, mosquito eating them. And if you don't work, you don't eat. They would handcuff them and put them, which is behind the back. They had to sleep on the ground, and they had to pee in themselves, excuse my French, because they couldn't get up to unbutton their pants, right? Roasters, which is roast fig, blubber, and dashin. That was their meal. No gospo or sweet drink to wash it down. The atrocities committed by the PRG, by the PRA on the Rastafari community in Hopevale boggles the mind. I don't care how much you love Maurice Bishop. Don't put him at the right hand of God the Father. Don't do that. Because he used to be in Hopevale, along with Kenrick Radix in Hopevale, along with Victor Husband in Hopevale, and of course, Bernard Cord. They all saw the atrocities. Every one of them knew about it, but it was a hush-hush. If you talk heavy manners, I would like Dr. Terence Marichaud to explain what under heavy manners mean and why thousands of Grenadians were locked up, denied rights. You talk about laissez-faire? I was in the same, not in the same cell, but in the landing with Leslie Pear. It was a detainee jail built by the PRG. They used the Cubans to build that. Let me direct your attention. You go up to
Mr. Child, before you proceed, yes, I want you to document all of these, but let us talk about the significance of the dates. The October 25th.
Right. Let me get back to the date. I'm sorry for going too long because these guys, they pick and choose what they want to talk about. And they
the same can be said of Sir Eric Matthew Gary. There would not have been a revolution without the repression that occurred on the Gary regime as well. So it was. We also have to put that in context as well. But yes, so October 25th holiday, sir, as opposed to the 19th. Should the 19th be declared a national holiday? A National Heroes Day. Yes, go ahead.
I got it. The way I look at it, I look at the 19th as a day to remember, to mourn, to go to church and pray for the souls departed. Many were mowed down, including school children, Gemma Belma, and a lot of others. I have been there on many occasions. I took pictures there for my book. My book is called Under Heavy Manners. It's going to come out next year. And I hope some of the panelists will take a read because that will change your mindset a little bit. Also, the 25th, when many mothers and fathers saw their relatives for the first time coming out from incarceration, a lot of them spent 23 hours a day in a cell without window, without air condition, without fan. They had to poop in a bucket with water. And that goes for your boss, Leslie Pear too. Tillman Thomas, his cell was about 4 cells from mine. Winston de Ravine, Lloyd Noel, and the other one called, oh my God, what's his name again? Lloyd Noel, Leslie Pear, and Tillman Thomas. And there are some other big ministers and so forth from the Gary era, right? We were abused. So for us, the 25th of October would forever remain Liberation Day, Freedom Day. It would be celebrated by our people, especially up north. I'm from Tivoli. That day would be celebrated as Emancipation Day, Go ask my mom how she feels about October 25th. So for those who were not abused, they did not walk a mile in our shoe. They did not have to sit in a bucket. And after they poop in a cell, sometime in front of 2 other men, I had to pull on my pants. Then the PRA who have us locked up would tell us he has no toilet paper. I want to know how Terrence Marish are gonna feel about that. And they're laughing at us. And who used to be in the prison, poking fun at us and peeping detainees at night? I took my 2 eyes and see Maurice Bishop at Richmond Hill Prison myself, smoking cigarette one after another, chain smoking. He was in the PRA booth overlooking Regal Cinema down below the Botanical Garden.
Let me bring back Dr. Marichaud here, because Dr. Marichaud, of course, that period of Grenadian history, we cannot get away from the fact that it's still emotionally charged, it's still politically charged for many people, just by the nature of the volatility of that period. And after reading Ewart Lane's book, I came to the conclusion that it was a kill or to be killed situation in the context of the 1979 revolution to begin with. But how do we get to a place, Dr. Marichaud, of achieving real truth and reconciliation? I mean, I know that we had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the early 2000s. I'm not too sure how you felt about that, but I do not know that Truth and Reconciliation Commission accomplished what South Africa attempted to accomplish.
No,
there are still very open wounds. There are still very open wounds on this issue. So I want you to talk about the conversation that Mr. Charles just articulated here.
Well, let me say first of all, Mr. Charles, I don't think there's any way that those excesses can be condoned. I was a medical student in Cuba at the time, and I was very critical about a lot of the excesses that took place. In fact, when we returned to Grenada for the first time, we went in 1979 and we returned in 1980, and we heard about the abuses that were taking place at the prison. On the detainees. I was very, very critical of that, and I was very surprised that some of the very people who were involved in those abuses eventually became members of the Central Committee and political bureau. In fact, one of them even became the ambassador to Cuba. Yes. When I was leader of the Maurice Bishop Patriotic Movement, I personally, in my capacity as political leader, publicly apologized for those excesses, even though I had nothing to do with it. But I felt it was my duty and my obligation, recognizing the injustices that had been brought on people like you, Mr. Charles, that were unjustified, that I made that apology at some point during my tenure as political leader. And I don't think they can be justified in any way. Many people were unjustly detained. Many people were abused, and we can look back on it as a period where, the so-called exuberance of youth, or what they want to call it, the over-enthusiasm, but also these guys who were just paranoid. They were looking for counter-revolutionaries under every single stone. I mean, there's very little you can say or do. You have to be so careful in what you did without being labeled as a counter-revolutionary. And you know what is ironic about all of this? Those very people that accuse people about being counter-revolutionaries turned out themselves to be the biggest counter-revolutionaries themselves. They're the ones that ended the revolution. So there's no way to justify it. Absolutely no way. If you had to go back into the past and rectify it, I wish there was nothing like that. And I can tell you that a lot of those actions that were taking place in that time, those heinous acts against ordinary Grenadians, they were not condoned by Maurice. Because, as you see for yourself, at the end of everything, Maurice ended up, not even like you stayed with your life. At least you can talk about it now. Maurice didn't have that opportunity to talk about it, and he lost his life in the whole process. So he was, worse than that. He was surrounded by a group of guys that were really extremists in their views, extremists in everything. He was under a lot of pressure. If you go through all the Central Committee minutes and all of that, you see at a very early time in the revolution, they were questioning his leadership, He was too soft, so they were pushing him to be hard and to be, more as they call it, Marxist, Leninist, and what have you. And at the end of the day, you could see that he was surrounded by the wrong set of people. If you heard Morris's wife speak about Morris in the activity on National Heroes Day, Morris was a given person. He wasn't this violent person. If he was a violent person, the way that this problem was resolved on October the 19th could have been completely different. He was not bent on violence. He was just surrounded by the wrong people, and sometimes you just had to go along for the sake of unity and for the sake of the revolution. But as I said, there's absolutely no justification for that. I think there's a need for public fora to really discuss that period where people like yourselves are going to be involved, and where a real period of soul searching and what have you would take place, where people can almost like a catharsis, where people can really let go what they have to say. Like you're talking about it today, and I think that is the only way we can go forward. That is still lacking, even after the
Dr. John, can I come in here? I know time is of the essence.
Yes, you can. But I want to. I saw Mr. John nodding there. I wanted him to get a quick word in on this school of thought that we're having here. Mr. John, is there anything else you want to add in respect of those tensions that still exist in the society? There are still great divisions in the society. It's good to hear Dr. Marichaud, and Dr. Marichaud has been consistent, by the way, Mr. Charles. I've covered him when he was political leader of the Morris Bishop Patriotic Movement, right?
Give him my
number.
Yes,
and Leslie Pierre also on the other side of the ledger, he also struck that conciliatory tone. So on both sides, you do have people who have come to the realization of accepting that accountability in respect of what was done. So we have to give people like Dr. Marichaud credit for doing that. But Mr. John, is there anything else you wish to add? And then Mr. Charles, I'll get back to you.
No, I want to agree with you, Kellen. I supported, I don't know whether Terry Marichaud remembers this, but I supported the Morris Bishop Patriotic Movement actively.
I do remember, Gus. I do remember.
Einstein Louison is my cousin. So was George, and I was totally implacably opposed to the sorts of stuff that Mr. Charles was talking about, and not just me, but the movement to which I belonged in Britain. We supported the revolution. We had the authority, if you like, because of what we had done both with Bernard when he worked in this country and with Morris. We were tied up with both of them even before the New Jewel movement was formed. And to a large extent, our view was that if you were taking people out of a period of tyrannical oppression, such as Eric Gary had imposed upon the nation for far too long, you can't immediately go and impose that same kind of tyranny upon those whom you believe are against the revolution. It was totally contradictory. And as a matter of fact, what it augured was exactly what happened on October the 19th. Because that same philosophy and that same ideology was what caused them to put Morris Bishop under house arrest. And we from this country protested, and we warned them that it was a kamikaze act and they should release the man and deal with the matter democratically, even if they had to get external support from people like myself and others. Rather than doing that, they decided to call us counter-revolutionaries and suggest that we were being briefed by the CIA, for God's sake. So, I mean, I fully understand what Mr. Charles is saying, but I want to just say this. That was the dark side of the moon, if you like, as far as the revolution was concerned.
So I'm glad we are admitting that dark side, because the revolution tends to be painted as this Shangri-La. You know, there was a suspension. I would have been in jail in the revolution. I'm telling you, I would be in jail based on the hard questions I ask ministers today. I'm sure some of them, if they had the capacity, they would throw me in Richmond Hill or Hopeville. Back then. Go ahead.
We don't have time. If we had time, I'll tell you about some of my own personal experiences, right?
Yes, sir.
In Concord, with George as my cousin, coming there to see my parents and to see me, because I was visiting from Britain. I had been at the time an education manager, education administrator, and the country wanted me to come and provide my services in terms of improving education. I agreed with that. But at the same time, the context within which all of that was being done, and that sort of repression that you're talking about, was totally inimical to everything that I stood for. So it isn't as if I'm being uncritical about those aspects of the revolution. What I'm trying to say is that's got to be seen in context and in perspective, and it should not be used to suggest that the whole revolutionary event
was bad. Yeah.
Exactly.
It was a transformative moment in the Caribbean. It was transformative. We cannot escape from that. But Mr. Charles, you wanted to add to what Dr. Marisu just articulated here, sir. Go ahead.
Right. And I want to say that you can give him my number.
Yes.
I would like to have a conversation, even another debate, because what I think we need to do is to educate and inform the population as to what went on. You remember the first thing the revolution did was, number one, they shut down all alternative source of information. No media, the Free West Indian, right? Nothing. Only what the Radio Free Grenada said, that's it. Okay. Two.
Yeah. But Mr. Charles, go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry to cut you, but we have to be honest. If we're talking about being honest, there is a reason why the revolution occurred in the first place. So Eric Gary was not a saint. He was not Saint Gary.
No.
Okay, because so I want us to be aware of that. But go ahead.
I am aware of
yes
how many years Gary been in power. We are not talking about that. We are talking about what happened between 1979 and 1983. If you want to go and talk about what happened between 1951 and 1979, then let's do it. I'm a historian. I can meet you there. But we are talking about the revolution. So let us deal with the revolution 1979 to 1983. So stop bouncing around over there, right? I'm quite capable to do that.
No, I'm aware of that, but I think context matters, sir. Context matters. There's a reason why the revolution occurred. That's all I'm saying. But I don't want to.
Revolution occurred.
Yeah, I didn't want to cut your trend of thought. But
that's not a discussion here.
Okay.
I am talking about. Okay, so let me talk about my experience and just allow me to speak a little bit.
Yes, sure.
Number one, apart from what happened, right after I was arrested and released, let me just tell you some things that you probably did not know. When I was picked up, I was placed where they hang people in condemned cell, next to a teenager, next to the hangman's rope in condemned cell. I can't remember how long I spent there. In fact, they did not even know my name. I was picked up. I had 2 pounds of flour to go and cook a pot of oil down, right? I was picked up in Tivoli Junction, going and cook a pot of oil down. I had to get the flour, so I went by Mr. Lyon's shop, and my friends had to get the back and neck, the chicken, to cook. And then we'll go and steal sugar cane at the Van estate, right? I spent all this time in Richmond Hill prison for nothing. When they released me from condemned cell, they brought me to the remand yard. That is where I met Jerry Romaine and a lot of people I didn't even know who they were, right? I think Teddy Victor and others, okay? Soon after that, I was shot execution style in my cell. I was standing inside of my cell, and James Bowen would testify to that, and other detainees, right? You could call Tillman Thomas if you will. He wasn't there yet, but he would tell you. Execution style, I was in the peephole. And if I could get a door, I'd show you. I was peeping the soldiers on them as they passed in shooting, right? One of them said, move your mother so-and-so from there, what are you looking at? And the one behind him, they had some serious looking AK-47. Aim his rifle in the peephole and blast the daylight out of me. The only thing I'm here talking to you now, Dr. Bubb, is because he was a step or two behind the other guy. The one in the front would have killed me. The bullet would have gone straight here. Okay? But the other one was, the one that shot was a step or two, so the bullet went diagonally. I don't know if you could see my hand on camera, but I'll show you. They mangled my left hand. So I have 1.5 hand. Okay? This finger can't move. Okay? They patch it, and I'm not going to show you what they did with my stomach to get flesh, to patch that up. Piece of a bone come down here, and the bullet came out from my pulse. So it was gushing blood. Crazy. I thought I would die. I was flinging like this. The whole, all 4 walls were red with blood. Then I held on to that. I thought I'm getting weak and I would die inside of there for loss of blood. I ran outside where I heard the PRA soldiers talking, and I said, get me to the hospital quick, I'm weak. A PRA just shot me in my cell, okay? And one of the other PRA said, what? He aimed his AK-47 at me, click, 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 click. And when he pulled the trigger, I was still standing, I wasn't dead yet. So my mind just told me, turn around and run. I start to scream and I run. Around this time now, on March 13th, my wife would tell you if she was here, I get nightmares. And sometimes I think I'm running and screaming and I'm punching and kicking her. She had to go in a different room and sleep. But she's at work today, she's not here. I could get her to come and talk to you. But anyhow, when I made it back to that cell, I dove down on that fiber mattress, bunk bed, almost knocked my head, right? Sometime in the morning, they come and got me. When they get clearance, I don't know if it's from Code or Austin or whoever it is, Bishop or whatever. I bled all through the night there, right? Brought me in the hospital, put me on a bed, and they still handcuffed the same hand they shot me in. Till in the evening time, no nurse could come by us. We surrounded by PRA. Everybody have an AK-47 with a knife on it, right? Brought me up and did the first operation. So when I came down, my hand was just, I couldn't even see. I didn't even know what they did, right? And after that, the nurses come running around. They said, Mr. Charles, you have to get injection. I said, what are you injecting me for? Well, they get a call from the prison. And I noticed my hand started getting black. And it started to swell and get black, okay? They said, some of the soldiers were shooting poison bullets at you guys. I'm like, what? So you would rot, your flesh would rot. My hand started getting black, okay? So it was me, Rasta Nanang, which I gave you Rasta Nanang number to call. I don't think you called him. And a businessman from America called Antonio Langdon, right? And he went down and they picked him up and all of that, beat him and all of that. I think he lost his lung and about 4 rib cage ribs and all of that. Long story. He died now. So I was going to die from slow poisoning. And I had to subject myself to so much injection. When they stick me with that needle, the needle big like that pen, they had to turn me 2 hours after I'm cramped. If I had to go in the bathroom, I had to get the needle first. And then the nurse would come and turn me on my side or on my back or whatever it is. I'm totally out of it. That is how I survived the poison that the soldiers and them. But they had other bullets. If they touch your blood, you die at the same time. I don't know the name of that. I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't a militia. So I was picked up twice. I was arrested twice. My mom left America. She came down. She got an attorney called Mr. CPO, an old man. And Bishop decided to go try us because Eugenia Charles, Tom Adams, other people calling about releasing detainees or trying them. He did. We went down to court in town. They had no evidence against me. They couldn't say a word what I did. Why did you arrest me? Nothing. The judge said, you're free to go. My mom came, my sister came, and a bunch of people from Tivoli, right? By the time I went outside, Dr. Bob, and I thought I'm going in the country, I'm going to suck some mangoes and other things like that.
And make that oil dung that you were planning to make.
Yeah, man, I had to cook that breadfruit. You had to get that back and neck. We didn't have no money, right? All we did at the time, teenagers, we still sugar cane and we cooked, you know, dumpling and twig and back and neck. Anyhow, long story short, they came again and they gave me a detention order. I'm in a plot to overthrow the government.
What year was that? Was that in 1981?
I think it might have been 81.
81, okay.
That time it might have been 81. I'm like, oh, so my mother is here. She almost died. My mom is in Tivoli. If you go up to Tivoli in the bakery right there, and my uncle, you remember that band, Grenada, may God bless you, Calabash? He and my other uncle, Wadali, the father of the guy with the barrel of grease, James Wadali. Well, that's my uncle, my brother, my mother's brother. So he came down from England too, together with my other uncle, the musician one, with that Calabash band, and went to Maurice Bishop. Bishop asking those guys, and why you pick up this guy? What did he do? They said I was mannish. I want to go and cook somewhere along. They want to go and search our house because Kennedy Boudlal used to date my sister. Well, go find my sister. I gonna cook my food. I tell them I ain't going, I refuse. So because of that, you're gonna kill me? And all of a sudden, I'm in a plot to overthrow the government with a Boudlal gang. I don't know what they call that. And who was on the radio saying that I was in a Boudlal gang? This same Maurice Bishop. After they shot me in my cell, they went and they cleaned down the prison. They washed down the blood and all of that. Who went on the radio talking about I was trying to escape lawful custody? This same Maurice Bishop. I mean, who's selling snake oil here? This same Maurice Bishop. Now he's a saint. He's a saint, an angel. So what I'm saying to you, this 1 hour program or 2 hours, whatever it is not enough.
It's not enough. Absolutely not. No, it's not enough. And we actually intend. I'm not going to give away the plot, but we actually have some plans of bringing both sides together to have a reckoning, a reckoning and reconciliation, because that is such a critical and unresolved conversation that needs to happen. So, Mr. Charles, with everything that you just articulated here, October 19th as a national holiday, do you agree with the decision to make it a national holiday?
Yes, I agree to make it a national holiday, and I support the effort by Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell. And let me tell you something, this guy is smart, he has heart, and I think he would be the greatest leader Grenada has ever seen. But I don't
even greater than Sir Eric Gary.
He will be. He will be. I'm gonna tell you why. He knows. Let me tell you something. Right now he's young, but he's learning fast, right? I don't mind celebrating, right? A martyr or martyrs and so forth, Grenadian heroes. We have Uriah Butler, Buzz Butler. We have, Dr. Mary Shaw. We have many others in the past. We would not just pick one person, Maurice Bishop. Why it has to be only Maurice Bishop, right? Just make it a day to remember, some remembrance day or whatever it is, but not necessarily celebrate one man. Tillman Thomas stood for something, and let me just say it quickly before I go, right? When all the abuses start taking place, Leslie Pear, Tillman Thomas, as quiet as you see him there, and Lloyd Noel, decided they would challenge the PRG, stand for freedom, stand for something, stand on principle. And they went out and they published the paper. And who put them in jail? Maurice Bishop. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot stand for truth and right or righteousness, and at the same time, you're supporting evil and wickedness. You jail Tillman Thomas and have him in a cell 23 hours a day. Sometimes 2 days we don't bathe. They're feeding us cockroach food with rat droppings, weevil, all the rotten split peas, and all of that. You don't want to know what they did to us up there. And before I go, Ralph Thompson, he died in prison. Is he a hero too? What about that guy Ethelbert John from Monkridge, who they denied medical care in the remand yard? I was there. He died in jail. Would we make him a hero too? And Rasta Jerry in Hopeville, that they beat because he wouldn't go and work and plant food for the Cubans. And they starved him. He dropped dead. Those are crimes against humanity. How could you go and celebrate Maurice Bishop and make him a hero? Maurice Bishop used to be in Hopeville. Maurice Bishop used to be in Richmond Hill Prison. And then when you speak to James Bowen, he's going to tell you what Maurice Bishop did to him.
I spoke with Mr. Bowen. I was hoping that he would join us this morning, but I'm not too sure what happened.
Well, the hour difference. I tried to wake him, but he's asleep. But
probably.
I'm just saying, when Bowen come on, and he would tell you about the torture, some of the things that took place. I interviewed a lot of the detainees and those who were tortured, especially the women on the fort, Mount Royal, and in the madhouse, which you call the asylum, the beatings, the electric shock. Okay? Some of them, Victor husbands, when they ask to get sanitary napkin, he used to tell them, go and get cocoa leaf. 8 days, 7 days, 5 days on the monthly cycle without bathing, blood all over it. I don't want to get into the details of that. Don't talk about that revolution.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't talk about that.
All right. So let us expand the conversation a bit. And Dr. Marisol touched on it earlier. And in the context of National Heroes Day, and the question is to the panel, and we know how Mr. Charles feels and how Dr. Marisol feels, but what would be an appropriate date and an appropriate framing for a National Heroes Day? Dr. Marisol, I would start with you on that question.
Well, I think it's something that needs some deep discussion. Also, to Mr. Charles, I don't think the day was to glorify Maurice Bishop. It's not about that. The day is really for reflection, to remember the atrocities that were committed on that particular day when a prime minister, many of his cabinet members, and innocent Grenadians lost their lives. That is what it's designed to commemorate, not celebrate. So don't make it look as if it's being declared as Maurice Bishop Day and Maurice Bishop is being hailed as a hero. In my mind, he's a hero, but for you, I understand what you went through and I understand your experiences would lead you to a different conclusion. However, the whole question of heroes and of Heroes Day, I think, is a misnomer. I think in trying to highlight the importance of that day, that name was given, but I don't think it's a day that should have been declared any kind of with any kind of name at this point in time. Mm-hmm. I think it's something that really requires more in-depth discussion in terms of what are the criteria for determining that somebody is a hero. I remember clearly at one of our commemorative events on the fort, Bishop Clyde Harvey said that martyrs are dead people, but they only become alive when they become national heroes. Now, I think that statement is very, very profound as well. But in this whole question of determining how to name the day, I don't think we can just declare it just like that. I think it needs to be subjected to intense discussion and participation from people. I think it could be more appropriately called Martyrs Day rather than Heroes Day, because many people lost their lives on that day innocently while trying to support Bishop, you know. And all that was said, again, I sympathize with Mr. Charles and all that he went through. But I say again, in all fairness and in support of Bishop and what he died for, you see clearly that, you know, maybe some of the things happened, yes, and he might have been present and all that, but he as Prime Minister, he can't every single matter that takes place be on the ground and see everybody and do everything. He relies on a number of people to give him information. Now, if you're picked up and they say that you're a contact, he can't personally go down and investigate your case and say that you're not. I mean, I'm sure he sympathized with a lot of people. In fact, I've heard stories where he had given orders for certain people to have been released and only to find out they were never released. So there are a lot of nuances, there are a lot of things that took place in that period there that, again, we cannot justify. We understand the pain and the suffering that you may have gone through, and there's no way to justify it. But again, remember the context in which all of this developed, where we had a group of young extremists, I would call them that, who were running the show behind the scenes, led by another, so-called intellectual who they looked to as their mentor. And I guess in the exuberance and enthusiasm to make everything go right, they made a lot of mistakes. As a matter of fact, a lot of people who were detained should not have been detained, and we understand that. We really understand it now in retrospect. At the time, however, it took place in that context, and it's unfortunate. And I said, again, the biggest difference from Archbishop is the fact that when you see how everything played out, he lost his life. He's the one that ended up being executed. And for what? What was he executed for? For standing up and saying, I don't agree with you. So it must mean that there are a lot of things he probably didn't agree with during the whole course of the revolution, but was forced to go along in the interest and of the unity of the revolution, in the interest of preserving what was the status quo at the time. And admittedly so made a lot of mistakes and would be, I guess, criticized and condemned for a lot of the actions simply because he was a prime minister. But as you see for yourself, as I said, he himself paid the ultimate price, and it must have meant at some point in time that he was not in agreement with what was taking place at that time. And the events of October the 19th, and not just the day itself, but in that period leading up to October
that period, the period leading up to it,
yes. Would have shown you that there's a sinister hand behind a lot of what was taking place that he wasn't in agreement with. But again, as I said, in the interest of the unity of the revolution and what was going on at the time, country that was being hounded by the United States because of not holding elections and all the problems associated with running a country in the midst of all of these hostilities would have led to a lot of the problems that took place. So we have to discuss this whole question of the October 19th. In fact, many people just wanted it to stand alone. This October the 19th. Like how the United States have 9/11, just October the 19th. Don't give it any name at all. And maybe designate another day as Heroes and Martyrs Day. Because that day is so important to us as a people that it is not a day that you can, if you go to Heroes Day, it changes the whole context of what a day actually means. If you call it just Martyrs Day alone, it changes the context of the world. So again, we have to come up with a consensus, but a consensus that is based on ample discussion with the parties involved and with the various stakeholders. And when we come up with a designation for that day, I don't know necessarily, again, that you need to call it any day but October the 19th. And remember it for what it is worth. But if you need to give it a designation or a name, that name must have significance. It can't be just a name where you just say, call it Heroes Day, because it really conveys the wrong impression.
Very good. Very good. Mr. John, you've been sitting here listening to all of this. Let me bring you back into the mix here. You work within the context of history, understanding the importance of history, especially of the history of Caribbean immigrants in the UK. So you can probably provide some advice and guidance here. If you were to offer the government advice in respect of how to designate a National Heroes Day, what would be your thought process around that?
Well, you may not know this, Kellen, but about 10, maybe 12 years ago, I actually sent a proposal to the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell, who incidentally started school on the same day in the same class as myself at Presentation College all those years ago in
So
1958.
did you also play cricket with Dr. Mitchell when you were in PBC, or?
I didn't play cricket with him. I did other things. So he and I mean, coincidentally, he and I and Maurice Bishop were at Presentation at the same time. The proposal I was making is this: Grenada, as a small country, has had a very, very turbulent history. And part of that turbulence has been the fundamental denial of human rights to any number of people. And particularly in relation to the demagoguery of Eric Gary, who I mean, it's just mind-blowing to believe that he was once a very a popular and effective labor leader. That turbulence has left many stains. And, you know, we keep on having layers and layers of trauma before we deal with and heal from one particular layer of trauma. Other layers come. I lost my friend. We were Dominicans together, Father Irenaeus Alexander, whom many people, particularly from the St. Patrick's area, would remember. He died as a result of opposition to Gary. Rupert Bishop was killed, assassinated by Gary's mongoose gangs and so on. So there's been many traumas within the society. And okay, we bury our dead, we mourn about the events, and we move on. It seems to me that what this business of the 19th of October gives us, as if you like, the zenith, the culmination of a whole series of turbulent events, is the opportunity to say, okay, we will establish a peace center on Fort Rupert that actually takes account of all of those things that happened before 1979 and since, including some of the stuff that Dennis Charles was just talking about, including the martyrs of June the 19th in Queen's Park. So there's a whole heap, and we've got to be upfront about those things and understand that even at a time of revolution, which ought to be about human liberation, people's human rights were being trampled upon. So we must have some national understanding and acceptance, acknowledgement of these wrongs, and as a nation pledge to go forward with them. We have to take account of what Dennis Charles was saying and the hurt that that's still causing for generations of people. We have to take account of the suffering of those who still can't bury their dead because the bodies have not been found. And we've got to take account of all that was wrong in the nation state, and all the evil that was done under governments before the revolution. And if we were to come to some understanding of all of that and have some national symbol, national monument, national space where we take all of that into account and we build in structurally healing processes, then I believe we would be getting somewhere. Terry Marichaud is right. October 19th can't simply be about Maurice Bishop and the assassination of those martyrs on that particular day. Our cumulative history and all that trauma that we've got to work through has got to feature in that in a manner and within a structure that actually allows for that to happen.
Very stirring. I propose, and perhaps the panel and the audience would agree with me, that Mr. John should chair a new Truth, Reconciliation, and Justice Commission. Mr. Charles and Mr. Marichal, do you agree? Do you agree with does the eyes have it? Do the eyes have it here?
You have it. You have it. You have it. You got it.
I agree, and I
Yes,
would love
Mr. Charles,
to
go
talk
ahead.
with Mr. John. And just one last thing before I forgot. We try to cover so much in a short space of time, but I wouldn't be here had it not been for a schoolmate of mine, Steve Lalsey, who saved me from being shot in the hospital. And I'm talking about the night of the bombing. I was in Aqua Ward, recovering from what had been done to me at Richmond Hill Prison. And people were running, screaming, cars, noise, ambulance, all of that with what happened in Queen's Park. And I just wanted to hear. So there was a patient with a radio. And I could have walked. Rasta and Nanan was messed up, and Antonio Langdon was bedridden. He couldn't do anything. So I walked out from my cell just trying to listen with my ear, but the guy kept walking up and down and I kept following him. I was not on my bed. The soldiers came, I was missing, and an order was given to find me and pass me out in the midst of the crowd, wherever they catch me. And Steve Lalsey, who was a cadet in Queen's Park at the time, well, we went to McDonald College together from Form 3, 4, 5. I never went in Form 1 and 2. I went straight into Form 3. And he got me and he said, run, Grappa, run. My nickname in McDonald College was Grappa, right? So when I hear Grappa, I know it's somebody who knew me from school. And he tell me, get inside the ward on my bed fast immediately. And I had to run between people on the hospital wall, kind of crouch down because I'm tall. By the time the soldiers got in, the hand on the trigger in the ward, but they couldn't execute me in front, the nurses and all of that, right? That is the reason I am still here with you guys today. Anyhow, months after that, Steve Lalsey, the Stanislaus brothers, and Andy Courtney, and I could say mistaken identity, okay? They were gunned down, mowed down by PRA soldiers in Plains, St. Patrick. I never had the chance to come out of prison and tell Steve Lalsey, thank you. His date, that haunts me to this day. So I have a lot of sleepless nights. Sometimes my wife has to go in another room. I get my trauma, I don't go to work. It is hard. Bernard could apologize to me, and I forgive him. Lester Redhead, Goat Redhead, he apologized to me. I met him in Lavalane, down by the airport. We eat, we drank, we shake hands. I could send you the photos, and I say I have nothing more. You know, I don't hate you. Last week, I was in Florida with the NDC, and a gentleman there asked me, please, it's 40 years, if I could forgive Maurice Bishop. It took me a while, and I said, you know what? If I could forgive Bernard Cord, then I could forgive Maurice too. And today, on this day, I no more have anything in my heart for what he did. And I could tell you, and the audience listening to me, that I, Dennis Charles, I am prepared now. Not that I would forget, because a fish rot from the head. Those things could have been stopped. He didn't, but I would forgive him. I'm a Christian. Thank you.
Very, very powerful there. In the same way that Marcel Belmar forgave Bernard Cord and those who were accused by the courts of assassinating Maurice Bishop and his cabinet colleagues, the same way you today are saying that you are forgiving Maurice Bishop and those who harmed you during that period. That is very powerful, very touching. And we thank you for being vulnerable to have this conversation here, Mr. Charles, on the Bubb Report. We really appreciate this. Now, I'm going to bring back the rest of the panel here. Now, a couple of years ago, Grenada had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Mr. John and Dr. Marshall, do you believe that commission really accomplished much in respect of bringing closure? Or do you find that ordinary citizens are the ones who are engaging in their own individual level truth and reconciliation activities?
I would say it accomplished some things, but in terms of reconciliation, I think we are very, very far away from that still. The conclusions of that commission have not brokered the kind of peace among citizens that we would have liked to see. And there's still a lot of open questions, a lot of unanswered questions surrounding that period that we have not gotten to the bottom of. And you know, the statement that we always say, the truth shall set you free. Well, I think there's a lot still to be uncovered when it comes to what took place in that particular period. And until and unless we get at the bottom of all of this, I don't think we are any closer to national reconciliation, because 40 years later, you can still see that the wounds are still open. There's still a lot of hurt. The whole question of the remains. In fact, I made this call on the day we had this activity at the stadium. For anything that can be done to bring closure to that, we'd be happy. We saw the whole question of Patrice Lumumba, when the great freedom fighter of the Congo, the first prime minister of the Congo, when he was executed. His body was dismembered and put into a vat of acid, and the only thing that was left was a gold-capped tooth that was sent to Belgium. Now, for many years, the family never knew anything about his remains. And it took 61 years, in fact, before they discovered that. I think it was the chief of police who revealed that he was part of the group of people who dismembered him. And for once, they were now able to get just the tooth and returned now to the family of Patrice Lumumba. His son Roland said that at least now we can stop the mourning. So it is always important now to give closure to people. And I don't think the Truth and Reconciliation Commission accomplished that. We still have to go to that point where Father Duckett, Father Sean, as he's known, mentioned that there's a possibility that the remains were incinerated at the medical school. Well, I didn't see that the conclusion of that report, but he made mention of it at the stadium a few days ago.
At the commemoration, yes.
Right. And that is what we are calling for. If they were in fact incinerated, and I don't know. Once we can have that documented, that this is in fact what happened to him, because he quoted a forensic expert at the school, one of the people who was in charge of these investigations, who said that more likely than not, the remains were just incinerated. And that is unconscionable, in fact, when you consider that they recovered, they knew who the remains belonged to, and they were not even handed over to their families, but instead maybe they were incinerated. I think that was so unconscionable. But we still don't know. We have to bring closure to that period. And that is what all of this now is designed to do. If we can start something again, going beyond the conclusions of the last Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that will now lead to closure for the families, closure for all of the families of the victims of that particular period. And then we can now talk about reconciliation in a more holistic way. I think these are some of the elements that we need, some of the pieces of the puzzle that need to be put into place. And once that is done, I think we now set the basis for real reconciliation. But it must be based on truth. The parties involved must come out. For years, they've been promising a lot of people to say what took place, but we're no closer to that. And once we get that, if they're prepared to come forward in an honest and sincere way, in the interest of reconciliation, then all of that has to come out. That truth has to come out, and then finally we can put everything to rest once and for all.
I just want to follow up on what Father Sean Doggett said at the event at the Kirani James Stadium. And as someone who, at that time, given the great reach of American imperialism, given the ideological geopolitical theater that existed, you had the Iron Curtain, you had the communist bloc at the time, and Grenada was part of that theater. There is a theory that Reagan and his imperialist sympathizers in the United States did not want a shrine to people like Maurice Bishop and others. So doing away with his body, doing away with the bodies of the martyrs is something that perhaps was most appropriate for them to do at the time, as so as to not continue to stoke that revolutionary fervor that they wanted to get rid of in Grenada and the Caribbean, shall we say, in their backyard.
Yes, I think that was the popular thinking. And we saw, for example, what they did with Bin Laden's body. Now, instead of giving it back to his family, they decided to bury it in the sea. Now, he might be something to them, but he might be something to his family and the people who supported him. And to just do away with his body like that is tantamount to what we believe happened in the case of Morris and all of the other martyrs of October the 19th. That instead of handing the bodies over to the Grenadian people, where there'd been an outpouring of support, because people can say what they want about Morris Bishop. Morris Bishop was wildly popular in Grenada. Even the report that came out after the revolution from Dr. Patrick Emmanuel speaks to that fact that the Grenadians, first of all, the majority of people did not want the revolution to come to an end, and certainly not in the way it imploded. And secondly, that Morris was popular among the people. He was, there was no question about that, and that is who they wanted as a leader. And this was demonstrated on October the 19th, 1983. In fact, I always say that Morris died on his most popular day, when there was, in fact, a referendum, virtual referendum, when people came out in their numbers, the biggest demonstration of support that was ever seen. I guess some were onlookers and some were detractors, but at the same time, the majority of people wanted their leader. And in all fairness to him, they supported him. He was well supported. So, I mean, we can go back and forth and say whatever we want to say, but if the remains were recovered, there would have been an outpouring of sympathy and support that, very similar to what happened on October the 19th, 1983. And this is precisely what I believe, and many of us believe, was the objective of the United States in depriving the Grenadian people of his remains.
Mr. John, do you also agree with that theory?
I do agree with that theory. I think against the backcloth of the geopolitical climate that you mentioned, that's pretty plausible. I would say two things. One, I do not believe that it was simply the Americans who didn't want Maurice Bishop and the others' remains to be given to their relatives, and for there to be some sort of a national shrine to Bishop as the revolution's leader. I don't believe for one moment that is particularly what Bernard Cord would have wanted, because that would have garnered even more opposition to him, and the blame for Bishop's assassination would have been laid more firmly at his door. So I think we need to get that into perspective. The other thing I would say is this, that we need to I mean, I don't want to repeat myself, but we need to understand that in very many respects, it's not just what happened in that Central Committee and the process, the events that led to Maurice being put under house arrest, and then the October 19th attempts to rescue him and release him and so on and so forth, that matters. It's all the other stuff that mattered. The people were betrayed. The people of Grenada were betrayed by those leaders. and they brought all kinds of ideological considerations and paradigms to bear on a situation. It was like, making clay pigeons to shoot them down. It was completely ridiculous and in many ways self-indulgent. Yeah, because given the popularity of the revolution across the world, and given the fact that people had in Nkrumah and Ghana before, they'd had Pinochet in Chile and Allende and so on before. It isn't as if this was the first time a revolution was being undermined. And Bernard Coard, as a theoretician, a political theorist, and a historian, he knew that. So those people who wanted to have that little self-contained cabal determining whether Bishop's conduct was appropriate or revolutionary or not, they were indulging themselves and not taking account of the rights and expectations and aspirations of the people of Grenada. They needed to have subjected themselves to some external scrutiny. Mm-hmm. And it's in the absence of that the implosion occurred. The signs were there. You just got to read those minutes of that Central Committee. The signs were there. They needed some external intervention on the part of people who were dispassionate, not polarized, who could actually say, look, this is, even on your own terms, on your own ideological terms, this is going to lead to disaster. And these are ways in which these things can be healed. Mm-hmm. But they were too arrogant, the whole lot of them. They were just too damned arrogant. And consequently, even after the likes of us, who had worked with Bishop and the Mutual Movement in Britain, were saying, don't go down that route. It's kamikaze. Don't put the man under house arrest. Release him. Guarantee his safety. They just ignored everybody. And thus the tragedy occurred. So when we talk about truth and reconciliation, we need to have a forum in which we can examine every aspect of that sort of thing, including the whole political system itself. All sorts of things were happening before Eric Gary.
But Mr. Coard would say that he has accepted responsibility. He has accepted responsibility, moral responsibility, I believe, are the words that he used for what occurred. So in many respects, would you say that on the other side, at least with him, and with some of the others, that they have also accepted responsibility? I mean, some of them, went to Mr. Charles to say sorry for what they did to him. So your thoughts on that is, does the process need to be more intensified?
Well, the process needs to be more intensified. Bernard Coard needs to be more truthful. I mean that's the key fact. He might say.
So you're saying he's not truthful? That's your theory of the case.
Reading what this man has written, there is no way in which, given everything that everybody else knows, and what other people have said, George Louison before he died, Kenrick Radix, the whole lot of them, there is no way in which Bernard Coard is being truthful in what he's written. And that's part of the problem, you see. So whether it be him, Selwyn Strawn, Hudson Austin, whoever it may be, there needs to be an understanding that the people of Grenada are not stupid and should not be treated as if they're stupid. And there has to be some humility and remorse and understanding that, okay, the whole thing imploded upon itself, but if we're going to move forward, and if we're going to ask the Grenada people to trust again in their leadership and believe in their own power to act collectively to bring about change, there needs to be a much more open, honest, truthful reckoning of those kinds of issues.
Absolutely. On that note, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back to wrap up the program and get some of the viewer comments. But I do have I'm going back in time again. As a journalist, I also like to historicize things. And back in 2002, on the occasion of the launch of the Grenada Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I interviewed two people at the time who were in the heat of an election campaign. That was the 2003 election. That's Mr. Nazem Burke and Mr. Peter David. Now, during that period, the New National Party at the time attempted to paint both gentlemen as villains in the story of the October 83 tragedy. And I actually conducted an interview with them, but it's interesting how politics works, because fast forward to almost 15, 20 years later, and Mr. Peter David is now part of the same political organization that was villainizing his role during that period of the revolution. So let us we approached Peter David and Nazem Burke to seek answers.
When were you promoted as Minister of Finance?
I have to say to you, first of all, that this document that you are referring to, I've never seen it up until this moment. But I was promoted or announced to be a minister in government, not in the aftermath of October the 19th. I think that should be made very clear. This announcement was made, I believe, on October the 11th or the 12th. And it was an announcement that was made at a time when, on the same day that Bernard Cord announced that he was resigning as a member of government. He had resigned from the Central Committee before that, and we of the party who were not members of the Central Committee, in fact, were not aware of this, although we learned subsequently he had resigned from the Central Committee and the Politburo of the party even 1 year before the September and October events of 1983. But following, on October the 11th or the 12th, I don't remember the exact date, he resigned as a minister of government and as Minister of Finance. And it was at that time that it was announced that I was being promoted to the rank of Minister of Finance. Now, that resignation, as I understood it by Bernard, was initiated by what then broke out as a rumor suggesting that Bernard Cord and Phyllis Cord had plans or arrangements or an intention to eliminate Maurice Bishop. And on the basis of that rumor, as it then broke, I don't know the source of the rumor, but as it then broke, Bernard resigned, and I received notification from Johnny Ventu at the time, that the Central Committee had taken the decision to promote me to the rank of Minister of Government.
As in all of the other activities, on October the 19th, I was at the radio station in the morning. I left the radio station at about 10 or 11 that morning. I was out of the station early in the morning, and I saw the activities around town. I was driving through town, and then I went back to the radio station. And while we were at the radio station, we understood that some people were going to storm the radio station. So we decided to evacuate the radio station and leave it. And we left the radio station that morning. And I was up at Butler House for some time. That was the Prime Minister's office. It was also the Ministry of Information. And I had also had an office because at that time I had also become the Deputy Secretary for Information. And I had an office at Butler House, and we spent the morning at Butler House. I was not at Fort Rupert at all that morning. And as for knowledge as to what took place on October 19th, I have as much knowledge of most people in terms of the actual events of October 19th.
There was never any animosity from our side, and certainly from my side, as far as Maurice was concerned. We were just as ignorant as the population was, those of us who were not members of the Central Committee, of what was happening. So I think, I'll tell you the truth, in my assessment, it is a deliberate and deceitful attempt by those who think that they will be able to secure political power by creating this scaremongering to suggest that somehow Peter David or Nazim Burke is responsible for the death of Maurice Bishop, or responsible for the disposal of his body, or responsible for the crisis, or in some way had some kind of criminal responsibility surrounding what happened.
And welcome back, viewers and listeners. Apologies for that brief internet connectivity issue that we had here. But that's a conversation I had with Mr. Burke and Mr. David. What is the lowest common denominator here? I've always had a penchant for asking tough questions that people were uncomfortable with. But what we want to do, panelists, to bring you back, and what we want to do as well is to get some of the viewer comments that we have been receiving throughout this conversation. Marcel Belma is actually listening to us, and Marcel Belma is saying people need to ventilate about their experience during that period. As a historic reminder, who is Marcel Belma? Marcel Belma lost her sister, Gemma Belma, on the fort. Gemma Belma was a student at the time who was part of the close to 30,000 Grenadians who freed Bishop from under house arrest at his Mount Welldale property. They eventually made their way to the fort, and we know what happened there. So that's a comment from Marcel Belma. Meme is saying, forgiveness is good for the soul. Thank you for the info. Then we have Mr. Chad Forsyth, who is saying, as a child born in 1983, I am appreciating this program greatly. Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you, Mr. Forsyth. Please share this conversation with others of your generation so that they can also learn from what was shared here today. Jimmy Henry is saying there is an abundance of silence around events of the revolution in October 1983 by the remaining folks that are still alive and who are continuously withholding the truth. Hudson George is saying, Dr. Bubb, presently Peter David and Nazim Burke are no longer political comrades. That shows that there is a culture of cannibalism among PRG political cadres. They cannot settle differences in a peaceful manner. Mr. George, those are very strong words. Very strong words. Cannibal. It's a very strong word. Let us go on. Maura, welcome, Maura. Hello there. She's saying, it looked like only who was there would know the truth. There are two sides to every story, and like some say, now 3 sides. The third side is the truth. Chad Forsyth is asking, where can the public get access to the minutes of the Central Committee meeting? I believe that is on the Grenada Revolution website. If I find it, I'll share it on the Bubb Reports page so that you can have access to it. But that's where I was able to access it myself. Let us get to some other comments, viewer comments. Jennifer Gibbs is saying, I believe that power was intoxicating, so the participants themselves may not understand why they behaved the way they did. Let us unpack that comment by Jennifer. Gentlemen, do you agree with that characterization by Ms. Gibbs? Who wants to take that one? Gus?
Yes. Power intoxicating, yes. But I believe that a major part of the problem the PRG had, and I'm sure that Terry Marichaud would agree with this, if not Mr. Charles, they were dealing with some very indisciplined people. The people's militia were extremely indisciplined. They overreached themselves, and they believed that by toting AK-47s, it gave them the authority to do whatever they liked. They were undisciplined. They were badly supervised and badly managed, and generally speaking, they were intoxicated, so that in a place where everybody knows everybody else, you would go into a village and you would determine that certain people are persona non grata, or the contrast, or whatever else it may be, and you would sow divisions within extended families in a small village of 50 people. And the results of that was cumulative. You know, it radiated across the whole country. So the lack of discipline amongst the military, whether they were the People's Militia or the PRA or whatever, was tangible. You could actually see how that was playing itself out. Now, who had responsibility for that ultimately clearly had to be Maurice Bishop and Bernard Cord. So whatever propensities Hudson Austin may have had, the fact of the matter is that all of that needed to be brought under control. Who determined who was a contra and who wasn't? Who determined who should be detained and put in prison without trial or whatever, and who didn't? Because you see, unless you have at the top that fundamental belief that you will not repeat the tyranny of the past that the revolution came about in order to displace, then you will become even more tyrannical than those who went before. And those values, human rights values, the fact that you did not want to turn the nation in upon itself and have brother hating brother, sister, wife being suspicious for husband, and so on and so forth. You needed to keep that in check, even as you were vigilant about contras and about the stratagems of the United States or Eugenia Charles or whoever it was to bring down the revolution. And that is where they failed.
Yeah. Mr. Charles?
Yes, Dr. Bob, I fully agree with what Dr. John has just said, and I believe he alluded to some things that happened. We are often told that power corrupts. Absolutely. Right? And young folks, the ages of 14, 15, 16, toting an AK-47, you know, they can't even vote yet, but they could kill. You know, they should be in books, studying and all of that, but they're on the beach looking for Ronald Reagan and mercenaries when they come. Just pure nonsense. Grenada had a population probably of somewhere around 100,000. You probably had 200,000 AK-47. There was no need for that madness and craziness where they put ideology ahead of unity for the country. You build, we might have diverse opinions. I might like this, I like elections, I want you to call the vote and all of that. You decide no vote. One party system, one rule, no political activities. You open your mouth, you're a counter, Richmond Hill Prison, or if you're a Rasta, Oakville for you. No trial. They used to tell us power comes from the barrel of a gun. We're not going home. At one point, before my uncle came and visited me in the den, I thought I would rot there. There was no hope, no outside, no nothing for me, especially when they detained me the second time. After I won my case and they had nothing on me, then they served me another detention paper signed by Maurice Bishop of being in a plot to overthrow the government. Well, I was plotting inside the courthouse in front of the judge. And I turned around and I watched my mom. I couldn't see, I didn't even shake her. She couldn't even come nearby me. And they hooked me up and fling me on that PRA Jeep. Back in Richmond Hill Prison, back in jail again. I wanted to commit suicide. He's a brother of mine. How I wanted to go was I always had to go and do therapy on my hand, physical therapy in the hospital. And then I'll just run, let the PRA shoot me in the back of my head, something, and end it. But I was a Seventh Adventist at the time, then I thought I would go to hell because I pretty much killed myself. So I didn't know how to do it. But there were many who tried all sorts of stuff. We don't have the time to talk about that up at Richmond Hill Prison. And I followed Ralph Thompson before they killed him in prison, Ralphie from River Road, right? In a demonstration for betterment, for good food, right? Because when we get food, we had worms, the rat in the storeroom. We had to eat whether it's the bread or whatever, it's just rat droppings and all of that. Weevil, when they get the rotten food from Bayreuth or wherever they get it, the split piece, they're giving it to us. So you have these big white worms inside of them, ants, everything, cockroach. You just had to eat, else you die. Let me give you one quick story before I go. Mr. Lett, he's a brown-skinned man from town. I don't know where he's from. I was on the sea landing in the prison overlooking Regal Cinema, and we eating there. And he was throwing out cockroach. He threw out weevil, he threw out worm, he threw out cockroach. All kind of stuff, fly. A lot of flies we used to get, right? Then he said, shit, half of my food gone because you can't get nothing else to eat. You're gonna starve. He took out his glasses and he put the ration pan in his mouth and he swallowed cockroach, worm, weevil, ants, whatever it is, all the way. And then he said, yes, I'm good. I don't see no worm. I don't see no. So he never eat with the glasses again. Ralphie decided, shit, he not going to put up with that, Ralph Thompson. So all detainees, we call a strike. We're not eating, we want good food, and we want juice to go with it, right? Boy, they brought down a mile of PRA soldiers. Everybody with the AK, the hand on the trigger, and a big knife in front of the AK. They're ready to kill us. Well, I was scared. I'm a coward already. Ralphie started to say a lot of stuff, and he wouldn't back down. Then a PRA called Schoolboy. Schoolboy, I know him. He had rank. I don't know what rank he had, but he was up there, PRA. And another one called Frank. Frank pulled out a gun and shot at a Rasta from Grenville called Von Well. The bullet went through the Rasta nuts, the big hair, and broke out a piece of concrete in the D landing. Well, I really ran after that. I went in my room and I closed the door and I ate the same food that I was protesting I'm not eating because I know I'm going to starve. And not only that, I'm an Adventist. I'm not supposed to get pork. But they deliberately used to cut the big piece of pig meat and put in the pan, you know, like something, not a dish, a pan, like you're feeding dog or something, a ration pan. That's how they feed us up there because we're not human beings, we are animals. Not too long after that, Schoolboy put Ralphie in a cell on the sea landing in the middle, and they lock him 24 hours a day. They feed him until he started to get sick. Long story, he was slow poisoned. I was the last detainee to see Ralphie in the hospital because he brought me down to do physical therapy. And the PRA went and talked to him. When I saw Ralphie, I took a step back and I turned around. I couldn't look at him. He get black, his eyes down in a hole, he pined away, his leg was like that pencil, that pen, and days after that, he was pronounced dead in prison. Crimes against humanity. Nobody in the revolution took jail for that.
Mm-hmm.
That just
any accountability, yeah.
No
Okay,
accountability at all
yeah.
for what it is.
Mr. Charles, we will be having several. We do have some plans down the pike that we will be announcing on the Bubb Report in respect of truth, reconciliation, restorative justice, and healing around that period. And Dr. Marisho, Mr. John, I will be in touch with you on that, Mr. Charles, as well. Mr. Charles, you have been able to put me in touch with a lot of the ex-detainees. I interviewed one of the ex-detainees last year as well around this time, and it is a conversation that we need to have, a bringing together of the minds, if you will, on what was perhaps one of the most turbulent periods in Grenadian history. Dr. Marisha, you wanted to add something before we close?
I wanted to add
Yes,
something
before we get to closing comments. Yes, sir.
This particular question.
Yes.
I think it is, I understand what Brother John is saying. And it is very easy to justify, for example, the actions of the little soldiers who are under the command of other people who really were drunk on ideology. You talk about the intoxication that they had in that time. That power that they had was only based on ideology. That group of people. I'm separating Morris Bishop from that part of the conversation, because at a particular point in time during the revolution, he was accused of not being Marxist-Leninist enough, and he was even being accused of not studying, as other people. Morris was an intellectual. Morris knew what Marx and Lenin was all about, and he was one of the few people who could actually articulate it and bring it to the people in a way that they understood. But there was this other group of people who were so drunk on ideology at the time that they were not prepared to give up that power, or they would label you in such a way that you seemed inferior. So everything was based on that power that they had, that had to do with Marx and Lenin. If you're not Marx and Leninist enough, you didn't qualify to be a leader. In fact, as I always say, the revolution was sacrificed on the altar of ideology. Very similar to what Mr. Charles said before. That is what it was all about when it came down to the crux of the matter. Because Morris Bishop was seen as a social democrat. He was not seen as being hard enough to rule the country. And then he was surrounded by all of these hardliners who believe now that if you're not Marxist-Leninist enough, then we have to find a way to deal with the problems, rather than concentrate on what was taking place at the time in the country, which is that the country was moving forward, the programs were taking root in the people, the democracy was taking root, and we were just about to inaugurate the biggest infrastructural project in the history of the country, which was the International Airport. So contrary to all of the facts, all of the accusations that the revolution was in the midst of disintegration within 6 months, that was just so totally false. It was a revision of history at the time, and the very people who were accusing him of Morris of not working enough and not being disciplined enough were the ones who were not working themselves. So that power was just based on ideology. And, the little people that came under them just had to follow them, because, again, if you're not Marxist-Leninist enough, you're not qualified to run a committee or to do anything. As a matter of fact, I'll give you my own personal experience. When I was in the early days of the revolution, I had a degree from an American university. I was a captain in the army. I was also responsible for the day-to-day protection of the leadership at every single victory rally. And when the time came to go to Cuba, the person who was chosen, I was the most experienced, I was the oldest person. I had all these responsibilities as far as the leadership was concerned. The first commander of the first military camp, which was Camp Butler. I trained all these people up in Grenada myself. And when it came to, not that I wanted a position, but I was not even considered as the person to actually lead the Grenada delegation of students to Cuba. Somebody else who had party affiliation were the ones chosen to do that. Very inexperienced people who knew nothing about anything. And ironically, at the end of all of the crises that took place in 1983, the person who the students turned to as the person to handle their affairs in Cuba after 83, when we had no ambassador, because the ambassador had abandoned his post, was me. You see, so I'm not saying that because I wanted a position, but I'm just saying that all of it was based on, the power was based on ideology. I didn't want any power. I wasn't a Marxist-Leninist. I didn't know about Marx and Lenin in the way that these people were talking about it during the revolution. In fact, one thing I always remember, and I also have to say that at every program, when Morris was killed, there was one particular member of our student population who was studying medicine with me. He said, when we were distraught, we were crying, we were just totally devastated. This man just said, yes, now the true communist in power. I will never forget those words. And that for me just crystallized everything that took place in that period that led to October the 19th and to the demise of the revolution as we saw it.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Professor John, we are going to get to you for some closing comments. We will start with you for some closing comments as we wrap up today's program.
Okay, the first thing I want to say is I agree very much with what Terry was saying about ideology. Those people were reading the wrong books. I mean, you know, in terms of Grenada and the relevance of ideology, there could have been no one more ideological than Kwame Nkrumah, no one more ideological than C.L.R. James, no one more ideological than Amilcar Cabral and that revolution he was leading in Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau and so on. And what was distinctive about those lessons was that it was rooted very much in the history of the country, the history and aspirations of the people. It wasn't some ideologues, you know, reading Marxist Leninism and trying to squeeze Grenada into some sort of a narrow, ill-defined and irrelevant paradigms, and that was part of the problem. So the basis upon which the country was led down the road of self-determination, engagement at the level of the citizenry, farmers, women, youths, the popular education program, and so on and so forth. All of that gave way to, at the Central Committee level, a kind of obsession with ideology and an ideological framework which had no relevance whatsoever to what was going on elsewhere in the country. And we need to, if we don't understand those things, we were at a very critical moment. I agree with what everybody has said about Deacon Mitchell. But if we don't understand all of that stuff, we won't be in a position to lay the foundations where a leader like him could be successful. Because there would always be the danger of repeating some of those mistakes. How do we deal with the youth question in the country? How do we deal with the question of women? How do we deal with the question of the exploitation of girls and women sexually in the country? How do we deal with the issue of unemployment and all of those regions within the economy that require immediate attention? So in other words, what I'm saying is we need to learn the lessons both before 1979 and between 1979 and 1983. And in order to do that, there has to be some serious conversations. The space has got to be made for them structurally within the nation. And we must have a vision of where we want to get to once these conversations have been had.
Very powerful reflection there. Mr. Charles, over to you. Closing comments.
Dr. Bob, I want to say thank you so much, finally, for hearing my voice.
It's been a long time in coming.
Well, you've been late because I've been all over the place from George Grant to I've done so many interviews on Ride Along, George Grant, Sunday, you know, all of that. But anyhow, I'm happy to meet Dr. Marisho. I'm also happy to meet Dr. John. I have a wealth of information to provide. Eyewitness, because I am an eyewitness as well as a victim. My book is called Under Heavy Manners, and I'll just let it go next year. You know, I've been waiting on something and I couldn't get it. So I held it up, but I believe I would be able to get it now with the Deacon Mitchell administration. And while I'm on that note, I believe that Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell is going to be a transformative figure. I have a lot of confidence in him. He's well read. and he is astute, right? We would give him the necessary advice or information so that he could make his decision, putting ideology aside, forget party politics or who you vote for or not vote for and all of that. Whatever we do it for Grenada as a whole. We are all Grenadians, whether you vote green or you vote yellow. We're going to build the country together, all right? Lastly, though, we must chronicle the abuses of the 4.5 years, right, that took place. They were horrendous abuses. And what were done to the female detainees and all of that, handcuffing them on the foot in the hot sun without water, rain wetting them, sun drying them the next day, and all of that. We're going to get into all of that. The crimes were, you wouldn't believe that was Grenadians doing that to Grenadians, right? In this so-called glorious revolution. There was no glory there. So fooling the people and selling snake oil, I don't do that. I am straightforward. I talk and I present victims. I present their stories. I could give you a lot of the detainees. I'll be in Grenada next year. If you want to come up and interview some of the survivors, I'll bring you to the house and walk away and you talk with them and let them tell you what torture is about, including electric shocks and all the things that they did during the revolution, right? War crimes or crimes against humanity. No way to talk, So under heavy manners, the revolution died. It started peacefully with minimal death and destruction, but it died on the altar of ideology. Thanks again for having me. And whenever you have another show, of course, you know my number.
Yes, I will be in constant contact with you, sir. And Dr. Marisho, it's so good to see you after so many years.
Yes, it is. I mean, we used to be so close, and I hear you come to Grenada, and I wonder how.
Yes, and I ain't come and see you. Well, but we have to change that. We have to change that.
Let me just say, though, that those who say that they accept responsibility for the events of October the 19th must do so in a blanket way. Don't say that you accept responsibility for what took place in that period and then find ways of justifying it by saying, for example, that Cuba was involved and Fidel Castro was involved and all of that. We know that that is not true at all. Cuba was not involved in what actually took place among the individuals who decided to use ideology and eventually liquidate Maurice Bishop, given the impression that, he was, first of all, that he was killed in crossfire and all of that. They must accept responsibility and then come out and really say the truth as we expect them to do so, and we have been waiting for so many years since they released from prison. The other thing I want to say is that, yes, October the 19th came about. That was the culmination of the revolution. And it must never be repeated again, those kinds of events. We must learn from those experiences. And while we learn from those experiences and say they must never be repeated again, we must look back from October the 19th to March the 13th, 1979, during which you saw the greatest demonstration of people's power, that there's a blueprint for the development of the country that is there for all to see. While it might not be glorious for Mr. Charles, I can tell you there are glorious pages in that period that if we look back, we will see that we didn't have to do things as how other people do it. We were carving our new democracy, we were carving a new way of development that worked. There's no question that it worked. All of the different programs that you alluded to earlier in the program show that there's a formula for a new dispensation in this country if we decide to embrace it. And one of the failures, for example, of the last the governments of the past, is that failure to embrace the positive programs of the revolution. If we go back and we look at what benefited people, that was never done before, and we decide, no, let us adopt those programs again. Those programs of people's power, those programs of people's participation, those programs of empowering workers, young people, women, across the board, and also supporting the leader of the day. If he's popularly elected, we need to rally around him and support him. Once the election is finished, we need to bury our differences. You shouldn't be yellow or you shouldn't be green after that. Really, you should be supportive of the government. Criticize what they do that is wrong, but embrace and support everything that they do that is right. If you can do that, take a page from the wide book of the revolution and all of the achievements of the revolution, and embrace them and implement some of them, and learn from the lessons of October 19th, never to repeat at the level of violence where Grenadians would turn on Grenadians, not only Grenadians turn on Grenadians, but more so a group of people turned on the people, rather than listening to their cries on that fateful day when they said, we want our leader, give us our leader. Instead of giving them their leader, you decided to turn the guns of the revolution on the masses and destroyed the whole process, a process that the Grenadian people never wanted to come to an end like that. They wanted rectification of the wrongs that were being done, but they never wanted an end to the revolution. There's an opportunity still because the blueprint is there. We need to adopt it, whether it's for the good part or for the bad part. We eliminate the bad part, never to go down the violent, stay away again, and embrace the ones that benefit people. I think we can go forward in the future as a united people if we do so.
Absolutely. Dr. Marisho, thank you so very much. Professor John, Mr. Charles, thank you all for appearing on this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Now, before we end the program today, we do have to issue a correction. Now, Mr. Cecil Belfon, also known as the Flying Turkey, has denied a claim made by a previous guest, Merle Hodge, on the last episode of the Bubb Report, in which she said she saw Mr. Turkey on the fort or within the confines of the fort. Belfon categorically denies the claim, and we categorically apologize for any misunderstanding or discomfort that was caused by a statement made by one of our guests here on the Bubb Report. Now, on behalf of the producers of the program, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing everyone a reflective, sober, and productive week ahead. We'll see you next week for another edition of the Bubb Report. We thank you all for watching. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG-10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have a much more than diplomatic passport. I don't buy that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not too sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bubb Report. We go there.